aches the body feels that no medicine can touch. They arrive without warning, a weight behind the ribs, a burning in the chest, a fatigue that sleep cannot cure. You think it is exhaustion, but it is not. It is the soul signaling distress. It is the language of the unseen self trying to reach the surface through the only instrument it has left your body. For every human life is the meeting place of two worlds, the visible, which is flesh and movement and sound, and the invisible, which is thought and spirit and will. When the two fall out of harmony, pain begins to speak. The old mystics understood this, that the soul, when neglected, cries out through the nerves and sinews of the body. They did not see demons in every illness or angels in every cure, but they understood that moral disorder often becomes physical echo. The body records what the mind denies. The weight of envy bends the shoulders. The fire of anger scorches the gut. The chill of despair slows the pulse. We do not always notice the exchange, because our age worships the visible and forgets the invisible. We treat symptoms and ignore causes. We fix the body and starve the soul. And yet, when you learn to listen, the pains themselves become teachers. They do not come to punish, they come to warn. They are the alarms of meaning, reminders that you have traded what is eternal for what is immediate. For blessings are not things you possess. They are states of being you must protect. Peace, gratitude, purpose, humility, compassion, discipline, faith, these are the true treasures. When they are lost, something else takes their place, and that something always hurts. The first ache is the heaviness of envy. It sits in the chest like a stone. You feel it when another succeeds and your joy falters. It begins as a thought, why them, not me? But it does not stay in the mind. It settles into the muscles of the heart, weighing it down until even your own blessings feel dull. Envy is not just sadness at another's gain. It is blindness to your own. It steals gratitude first, and then everything that gratitude would have multiplied. The cure is not suppression, but celebration. Every time you praise another's light, your own grows brighter. Every time you bless what someone else has, you make room for more to flow through you. The soul cannot be both jealous and generous. It must choose. The second ache is the burning of greed. It begins subtly, the restless desire for just a little more comfort, more control, more recognition, more applause. It feels like hunger, but it is not. It is thirst, the thirst of a spirit cut off from its source. The modern world feeds this thirst with endless salt, consumption, comparison, convenience. We drink and only grow drier. The tragedy of greed is not that it wants too much, but that it wants too little. It aims at accumulation when it was meant for creation. You were designed to give, to build, to bless, but greed turns builders into collectors and creators into consumers. The fire that once forged purpose becomes the fire that devours peace. The only antidote is surrender not to weakness, but to enoughness. To look at what you have and whisper, "This is sufficient. I will use it well." The third ache is the tightness of pride. You feel it in the neck, in the jaw, in the way you brace before every challenge as if to prove you cannot break. Pride is the armor of the insecure, a constant tension, a refusal to bow even before truth. It whispers, "You must be right, you must be strong, you must not need anyone." But pride is a fortress that becomes a prison. The higher its walls, the less light can enter. The soul suffocates not because it is unworthy, but because it cannot breathe humility. To bow is not to fall. It is to realign with reality. The humble man does not think less of himself. He simply thinks of himself less. And in that space where ego loosens its grip, grace flows again. The fourth ache is the fatigue of pretense, the slow exhaustion of living a life that pleases everyone but yourself. It feels like carrying invisible weight. You wake each morning and wear a smile that doesn't fit, perform roles that no longer resemble truth. This ache drains not by force, but by erosion, the daily loss of authenticity. The longer you play the role, the more your real self fades into background noise. The cost is peace, the reward is applause. But applause fades quickly, and when it does, you are left with silence that sounds like absence. Freedom begins when you no longer need to perform holiness, but to practice it quietly, imperfectly, consistently, to live from the inside out rather than from the outside in. The fifth ache is the stiffness of fear. It lives in the spine. You feel it when you hesitate to act, to speak, to believe. It tells you that safety is better than truth, that comfort is worth more than calling. Fear is not cowardice, it is misplaced worship. It kneels before the future and calls it God. It convinces you that uncertainty is fatal, when in fact uncertainty is the birthplace of faith. The opposite of fear is not courage, but trust. Courage fights. Trust flows. When you trust the goodness of life, fear loses its jurisdiction. The body softens. The soul expands. You learn to walk by faith, not because you see the path, but because you have learned who lights it. The sixth ache is the numbness of apathy. It creeps in quietly, disguised as calm. You stop caring not because you are peaceful, but because you are tired of being disappointed. Hope feels risky. Compassion feels costly. So you choose indifference, a slow suicide of the spirit. But the soul was not made for neutrality. It was made for fire. When you cease to care, you cease to live. The world tells you that detachment is power. Heaven knows that detachment from love is death. To care deeply, even when it hurts, is to mirror the Creator's own pulse. Passion is not the enemy of peace. It is its twin, when directed rightly. And the seventh ache, the deepest, is the hollowness of despair. It hides behind fatigue and cynicism, whispering that nothing matters, that nothing changes. It does not roar, it drains. It takes color from the world, flavor from the heart. It makes mourning feel like repetition instead of resurrection. But despair is a lie told by exhaustion to a soul that forgot it is infinite. The cure for despair is not distraction, but connection to truth, to purpose, to others. When you reach beyond yourself to lift another, despair loses its vocabulary. Service rewires the heart. Gratitude reintroduces light. And faith, even the size of a mustard seed, begins to rebuild what fear demolished. These are the seven aches of the soul. They masquerade as bodily fatigue, as emotional turmoil, as moral confusion. But they are simply signs that you have been feeding yourself on what cannot satisfy. They are not curses, but calls to awaken. The pain is not punishment. It is invitation, a sacred discomfort urging you to remember who you were before the world sold you substitutes for meaning. If you listen, truly listen, you will hear what the pain has been trying to say all along. Return. Return to gratitude, to humility, to faith, to discipline, to compassion, to stillness, to truth. These are the medicines. They are not found in stores. They are cultivated in silence. They do not numb. They renew. They do not promise quick relief. They promise lasting freedom. For every ache of the soul has its antidote, and every lost blessing can be reclaimed not by magic, not by manipulation, but by remembrance. Healing begins in recognition. You do not need to fight every ache with force. You need only to notice it. The moment you feel envy in your chest, you pause and ask, "What am I missing?" The moment greed burns in your hands, you pause and ask, "What am I withholding?" Every ache becomes a question, and every question a doorway. Pain, when acknowledged, loses its power to control. It becomes a map, pointing you back toward alignment. The soul remembers what the body cannot yet express: the longing for wholeness, for purpose, for the blessings that were never truly lost, only obscured by distraction. You begin to practice gratitude deliberately, as if it were a skill to train. You start small, noticing the rhythm of your breath, the weight of your feet on the ground, the warmth of the sun on your skin. Gratitude is not a feeling that waits for circumstance. It is a lens through which you see the world. When practiced daily, it begins to rewire desire itself. You no longer crave more because you notice enough. You no longer hunger because you remember your source. Gratitude restores balance where envy once ruled, and it quiets the body where fear once spoke. Discipline follows naturally from this awareness. It is not a yoke imposed by morality, but a framework that frees you. You begin to schedule your days not by obligation, but by intention. The hours of your life, once stolen by the noise of the world, now belong to the architecture of your soul. You learn that mastery over self is not punishment, it is liberation. You breathe more slowly, move more deliberately, speak more carefully, and think more clearly. The aches that once screamed in your body begin to soften, replaced by a quiet steadiness that no external chaos can shake. Faith becomes visible in your actions. It is not a doctrine to recite, but a rhythm to live by. The fear that once stiffened your spine is transformed into trust. You step forward without needing every detail, without needing certainty, without needing applause. Trust becomes the new compass. Hope becomes the sail. You begin to see that your body, once burdened by tension and pain, thrives when the spirit leaves. Where there was hollowness, there is now fullness. Where there was fatigue, there is now energy. Where there was despair, there is now purpose. Love begins to heal the ache of apathy. You extend attention where once you withdrew it. You give kindness without expectation. You reach beyond yourself to serve, to listen, to help. Every act of love becomes a balm, repairing not only relationships, but the self that believed it could thrive in isolation. The world, still noisy and distracting, becomes a canvas for generosity rather than a market for desire. And as you touch others, your own body relaxes, your heart lifts, the aches recede, replaced by a warmth that no medicine can provide. Even pain itself becomes sacred. You no longer fight it as an enemy. You honor it as a teacher. Every ache reminds you of limits. Every fatigue points to priorities. Every heaviness signals what you value most. You learn to listen to your body as a companion, not a tyrant. You learn that blessings are often concealed in the discomfort, that growth arrives first as tension before it is revealed as strength, that the soul cannot rise without the friction of the flesh. You begin to understand that the aches were never thieves. They were guides, conduits, pointing you back to the abundance that was hidden in plain sight all along. And slowly, imperceptibly, you begin to move differently through life. You carry yourself with steadiness. You speak with clarity. You act with intention. You no longer allow the world to dictate your pace or your priorities. The aches, once burdens, become rhythms, gentle reminders to pause, reflect, and choose. The body, once stiff with tension, moves fluidly again. The heart, once clenched with envy and fear, opens with patience and courage. The soul, once numb with despair, feels alive, awake, and ready to receive the blessings it has long forgotten to notice. And in this living of attention, gratitude, discipline, faith, love, and awareness, the first true miracles begin to appear, not in spectacle or fortune, but in alignment. Pain transforms into purpose. Hunger becomes clarity. Fatigue dissolves into focus. What once pulled you downward now lifts you upward. You realize that the body and soul are not separate, but collaborators, that health, peace, and abundance are the natural consequences when spirit leads and the self follows in honesty. As the aches of the past ease, the world begins to feel different, not because it has changed, but because you have. You notice that wealth, once a symbol of pride or fear, now becomes an instrument of purpose. Money is no longer an idol to worship, nor a weapon to wield. It is energy to steward, a resource to amplify meaning. Every coin you earn is no longer simply for accumulation, but for contribution, every investment a reflection of the values that now govern your life. The heart that once craved more now measures success by generosity, and the soul that once rested on comparison now rests in contentment. You understand that the blessing was never in possession, but in intention, and the richer you become in purpose, the more blessings flow naturally. Work transforms as well. Tasks that once felt tedious now hum with significance. The act of labor ceases to be a burden and becomes an offering. Every project, every conversation, every meeting is an opportunity to practice discipline, patience, and creativity. You see the extraordinary in the ordinary, the careful arrangement of ideas, the steady hand that guides a process, the quiet assistance given to someone who does not even know it matters. Work is no longer about climbing, winning, or proving. It is about aligning, serving, and cultivating. Even failure becomes sacred because it carries lessons that no book or mentor could teach. You no longer fear the grind. You embrace it as a way to honor life itself. Love becomes a living force in this restored world. You no longer give selectively or conditionally. You give with presence, with attention, with humility. You notice the small details that once escaped your notice. The tremor in a voice, the fleeting smile, the weight of unspoken words. Compassion becomes a habit, forgiveness a practice, and patience a quiet revolution. And as you extend yourself, something remarkable occurs. The aches of loneliness, despair, and envy that once gnawed at the body vanish, replaced by warmth, energy, and clarity. The soul that learns to love generously no longer suffers the slow poisoning of bitterness, for love itself is a form of immunity against fear, against greed, against pride. And now, in this alignment of body, mind, and spirit, you realize the true nature of abundance. It is not found in hoarded wealth, applause, or comfort. It is found in the richness of attention, the vitality of engagement, the freedom of intention. Abundance is measured not by how much you take, but by how fully you give, not by how many blessings arrive, but by how deeply you recognize them. The aches that once signaled theft are now markers of growth. Each one reminds you to live awake, to choose wisely, to value rightly. What was once pain is now power. What was once discomfort is now direction. You notice, too, that your presence itself becomes a blessing. In the silence of a room, in the steadiness of your hands, in the quiet dignity of your choices, you radiate an energy that cannot be bought or borrowed. Others feel it even when words are unnecessary. You become a living testament to what is possible when the soul remembers itself. The temples of distraction, convenience, and pretense which once loomed over you now appear as mere mirrors, reflecting a past self, and you pass them with neither fear nor regret, only gratitude for the lessons they imparted. Faith deepens not in dogma, but in lived truth. You walk with certainty not because the world obeys you, but because you now trust the flow of life itself. Every step is deliberate, every choice aligned with principle. You no longer ask for guarantees, for you have discovered that life's blessings do not come through control, but through consistency, patience, and the willingness to act rightly despite uncertainty. The aches of fear, fatigue, and despair, which once bent your body and clouded your heart, now serve as reminders of resilience, proof that the spirit can flourish even in hardship. And slowly the final truth emerges, that abundance, purpose, and peace are inseparable. The body, once a vessel of complaint, now moves with ease. The mind, once restless, now focuses with clarity. The heart, once burdened, now expands with love. Every ache healed, every pain understood, every temptation redirected becomes a tile in the mosaic of a life fully awake. You are no longer at the mercy of the world's illusions. You have become a master of your own attention, a steward of your own blessings, a witness to the sacred in the ordinary. And as this awareness settles into every breath, every action, every thought, you walk into the world with a new rhythm, quiet but unshakable, humble yet radiant. The blessings that once seemed stolen are now flowing freely because you no longer mistake their form for their essence. You understand that the true thefts were never of wealth, comfort, or acclaim. They were of presence, intention, and integrity. And in reclaiming these, you have reclaimed everything that ever truly mattered. And now, at last, you arrive not at a place but at a state, a quiet, unshakable center where the world no longer dictates your heartbeat, where your soul moves in rhythm with the eternal rather than the ephemeral. The aches that once gnawed at your body and spirit, envy, greed, pride, apathy, fear, despair, are no longer thieves but teachers. They have shown you the boundaries of illusion, the fragility of comfort, the hollowness of false security. Each one, once a tormentor, is now a guidepost pointing toward the abundance that always awaited your recognition. You breathe deeply, and in that breath you feel the convergence of body, mind, and spirit. The heaviness of envy lifts, the burn of greed cools, the stiffness of pride relaxes. Every sinew, every thought, every heartbeat aligns with purpose. Your hands, once clenched in grasping, now open freely to give. Your eyes, once narrowed in comparison, now widen to see beauty in what is ordinary. Your heart, once tight with fear, now beats steadily with trust. You are awake, fully awake, and in that awakening, life itself becomes radiant. You walk through the world differently. You no longer chase blessings. You embody them. You no longer strive for attention. You radiate presence. You no longer hunger for validation. You carry peace. Even the simplest acts, a smile, a listening ear, a helping hand, become holy in your hands because they are offered from a soul that remembers its own sacredness. You have learned that the world cannot steal what you already inhabit: awareness, integrity, purpose, and love. You are untouchable not through strength, but through alignment. And in this alignment, wealth is transformed. It is no longer a measure of fear or greed, but of stewardship. Every resource you encounter flows through you with meaning, to build, to serve, to bless. Time, attention, money, talent, all become instruments of grace. You understand that true abundance does not reside in accumulation, but in circulation. The more you give, the fuller you become. The more you create, the more life expands through you. The soul that knows this never starves again. Work itself becomes worship. Every task, every responsibility, every challenge is no longer a burden but a form of devotion. You do not labor for applause or reward. You labor because excellence honors existence itself. Each step forward, each problem solved, each kindness performed becomes a thread in the tapestry of eternity. The mundane becomes miraculous because you are awake, fully present, fully engaged, fully human, and yet more than human, a vessel for truth, a conduit for blessing. And love, the most subtle and powerful of all forces, flows naturally through your life. You love not to be loved, not to be noticed, not to be rewarded, but because love itself is the ground of existence, and to withhold it would be unnatural. Compassion, patience, forgiveness, attentiveness. These are no longer optional. They are instinct. The aches that once twisted your heart are gone, replaced by a luminous capacity for empathy. You see the spark of divinity in others because you have discovered it within yourself. Faith, too, becomes visible in every movement. You no longer live by certainty, but by trust. trust in the goodness of life, the rhythm of creation, the presence of what is eternal. Fear no longer stiffens you. Uncertainty no longer paralyzes you. You act not from desperation, but from discernment. Every choice is guided by the principle that life is not to be endured, but to be participated in. And that participation is the source of every blessing you once believed stolen. And finally, you understand that the journey of aches, pains, temptations, and illusions was never punishment. It was preparation. The soul that has been tested, stretched, and refined becomes luminous. It moves through the world lightly, steadily, surely. It does not need accolades, applause, or accumulation. It carries the only treasures that matter: presence, purpose, gratitude, love, and alignment with truth. The blessings of life are no longer sought. They are recognized. The abundance that once seemed elusive is discovered in the very act of being awake, being kind, being disciplined, being faithful. You walk into the day with quiet certainty, knowing that the world may still rush, shout, and distract. You are no longer carried away because you carry yourself. You are no longer tempted because you know what is real. You are no longer empty because you have remembered fullness. The aches that once signaled theft now echo gratitude. The body sings in harmony with the spirit. The mind rests in clarity. The heart flows in love. And in the deepest silence, the final truth emerges. You were never the victim of thieves, witches, or illusions. You were always the steward of your own soul. What was stolen was only what you had surrendered. And now that you have reclaimed it, the blessings never leave you again. So you walk onward, luminous, aligned, unshakable, carrying the sacred in every step. You do not need to tell anyone the secret. You do not need to shout it from rooftops. The world will notice, not because you demand it, but because your life itself radiates what cannot be stolen. A soul awake, a heart unburdened, a life fully lived. And somewhere, unseen, another soul senses the light you carry and begins its own journey, a quiet ripple of remembrance, a chain of awakening that stretches beyond sight. Even as the light settles in your awareness, the world hums around you with its relentless clamor. The streets carry 1,000 stories, each footstep echoing a desire, each glance concealing longing. Yet you move differently now. Where once your body stiffened in response to fear, now it flows with deliberate motion. Where once your mind raced after every fleeting distraction, now it lingers, attentive, savoring, discerning. This is the first miracle of awakening. The ability to inhabit your own presence fully, to breathe and feel without being pulled in 1,000 directions. The aches you once feared, the pains that whispered of theft and loss, have become companions, teachers that remind you to live consciously, to act with intention, to recognize the sacred beneath every ordinary surface. You reflect upon envy, that first ache, that weight that once pressed upon your chest with subtle cruelty. Envy had made your joy contingent upon another's life, your gratitude dependent on comparison. But now, seeing its face clearly, you understand that envy is never about others. It is about the disconnection from your own gifts. Each time you notice another's triumph and allow yourself to feel satisfaction on their behalf, a small liberation occurs, a vibration of peace that travels through your body, loosening the shoulders, easing the heartbeat, filling the lungs with air they had long forgotten. Gratitude becomes your shield. You realize that the blessings you feared were stolen were never theirs to give, never theirs to take. They were waiting for your recognition, hidden in plain sight, and now your soul knows how to claim them again. Greed, the second ache, had once lit your fingers and burned your gut with longing. You chased comfort, status, pleasure, and acclaim as though survival depended on them, as though your essence could be purchased. And yet the truth rises through your remembrance. What is given freely, used wisely, and invested in meaning, returns in ways more profound than accumulation ever could. Wealth, like sunlight, is powerful only when it shines upon others. Hoarded wealth is darkness in disguise. Circulated abundance is light. You see now that the soul that labors to amass without conscience is starved in the deepest ways, and the one who learns to steward with generosity becomes indestructibly rich. The fire of greed transforms into the fire of discernment, and the body, once tense with desire, now rests in the knowledge that sufficiency is both attainable and sacred. Pride, the third ache, which stiffened your spine and hardened your jaw, begins to release its grip. You realize that pride was not strength, but armor against vulnerability. You do not need to prove yourself, not to the world, not even to yourself. Humility is not the denial of worth, but the recognition of truth, that you are both extraordinary and ordinary, finite yet infinite, weak yet capable. The liberation is physical as well as spiritual. Shoulders unbend, chest opens, jaw softens. The energy formerly tied to defending ego now flows into creation, attention, and compassion. Pride no longer holds dominion. Grace moves freely through the spaces it once occupied. The fatigue of pretense, the fourth ache, uncoils from the body as you commit to honesty not only with others but with yourself. The masks that once constricted your face, the roles that once burdened your mind, the performances that exhausted your spirit, begin to fall away. To live authentically, you discover, is to give yourself permission to be imperfect, vulnerable, human. The muscles loosen where tension was stored. The mind clears where it once scrambled to maintain appearances. Even the heart feels lighter, no longer required to maintain the charade. Each act of authenticity becomes a small liberation, a gentle but firm correction in the alignment between who you are and how you live. Fear, the fifth ache, has long twisted the spine and clenched the gut, making each choice feel heavy with consequence. Yet through trust, the quiet, unwavering trust that the world is not your enemy, that effort matters more than outcome, that courage is measured by the willingness to act despite uncertainty, the ache softens. You feel the tension in your body dissolve as the mind relinquishes the impossible task of total control. The horizon stretches open. The steps you take are deliberate, but they are not anxious. The rhythm of your heart synchronizes with possibility rather than panic, and in this harmony, the body heals in tandem with the spirit. Apathy, the sixth ache, retreats under the light of engaged attention. You begin to notice that indifference was never comfort, but a slow poisoning of vitality. By choosing care, by extending attention, by allowing compassion to guide your actions, your muscles release the tension of disengagement, your circulation quickens with purpose, your posture itself shifts, as if carrying meaning lends weight differently than emptiness. The soul reawakens through acts of intentional service, small and large, and the body responds in kind, carrying vitality where lethargy once lay. And despair, the seventh ache, the deepest and subtlest, begins to yield under the gentle insistence of hope and faith. It is not vanquished in a moment, but gradually through repeated recognition of what is true, beautiful, and enduring. Each breath that draws in patience, each step that exercises courage, each moment of gratitude builds the skeletal structure of resilience. The hollowness that once made the chest feel empty fills with the recognition that life, however transient, contains meaning, and that even suffering carries lessons that transform the self. The body, once burdened by the weight of hopelessness, now carries a buoyancy that surprises you in its steadiness. You are alive in ways you had forgotten. You are awake in ways you could not have imagined. With each ache understood and each pain transformed, life begins to flow differently. You begin to see wealth not as a goal, but as a reflection of alignment, a measure not of possession but of purpose. Money, time, and resources no longer command you. You steward them. Every coin is energy, every hour a canvas, every talent a brushstroke on the portrait of existence. Where once desire drove your body into tension, now intention guides it into freedom. You no longer hoard for fear, for approval, or for comparison. You invest in the eternal, in creation, in connection, in acts of service that outlast the brief applause of the world. The body that once clenched with greed now moves with ease, hands open, posture relaxed, shoulders aligned with truth rather than pretense. Work, too, becomes a sacred instrument. What once felt like toil now carries the rhythm of devotion. Every task, whether small or monumental, is approached not with expectation, but with care, not for recognition, but for alignment with the deeper purpose that has been whispering through your life all along. Repetition, once tedious, now becomes meditation. Effort, once exhausting, now becomes expression. The body that once stiffened under the weight of responsibility now moves fluidly, finding balance between energy and stillness, strength and surrender. Each step forward is both progress and prayer, every action a living testament to attention and meaning. And love, that force more subtle than air, more vital than blood, courses through you freely. It is no longer conditional, transactional, or measured by what you might receive in return. Compassion, patience, forgiveness, and attentive care flow through every interaction. The body that once felt constricted by envy and apathy now opens, chest expanding, hands ready to give, eyes seeking what is true and good in others. The heart that once quaked with despair and pride now beats steadily, resilient, radiating warmth that no one could counterfeit. You have learned that blessing is both a state and a practice. You receive it as you give it. You find it as you cultivate it. You embody it as you align with purpose. Faith deepens in a way that is tangible in muscle, bone, and breath. You move with certainty not because the world promises you control, but because you trust in the alignment of effort with truth. The fears that once stiffened your spine relax as you step forward in courage. Uncertainty no longer paralyzes, for you have learned that life is navigated not by guarantees, but by fidelity to principle. The body reflects this understanding. Shoulders drop, the chest opens, the gaze steadies, and the pulse carries rhythm rather than panic. You are alive with the steady current of trust, and in this living the aches of fear dissolve completely, replaced by power that does not boast and strength that does not demand. Blessings once thought stolen arrive in quiet forms, in moments of insight, in connections with others, in the flow of work that is meaningful. The world which once seemed to siphon your vitality through distraction, pride, greed, and fear now appears as a stage on which your awakened self moves with clarity. Each movement, each choice, each breath is aligned with the rhythm of abundance. You have become a channel. What you act upon, you transform. What you touch, you illuminate. You recognize now that the thefts you feared were never external. The aches were internal, and by attending to them, you have reclaimed what is eternally yours: peace, presence, purpose, and the capacity to bless others. Even the simplest acts, a smile, a kind word, a patient gesture, now carry weight. The body, once a vessel of tension, moves with grace. The mind, once restless, focuses with clarity. The heart, once burdened, flows with empathy and courage. Each day, ordinary in appearance, becomes extraordinary because the soul inhabits it fully, awake, aware, and aligned. The light that once seemed distant now radiates through you, spilling into the lives of those around you without effort or demand. You walk through the city, past the crowd still chasing distractions and superficial gain, past the neon glow of false promise, and you move serenely, unshaken. The aches of envy, greed, pride, apathy, fear, fatigue, and despair, all seven, now serve as markers of transformation rather than afflictions. Their lessons imprinted upon your body, mind, and heart, they remind you not of loss, but of reclamation. Every heartbeat resonates with the truth that nothing external can steal what has been reclaimed internally. You have been tested, stretched, and purified, and in the process, the blessings you sought have been realized in a form that transcends circumstance, wealth, or acclaim. And in the stillness that follows this realization, you recognize the final, quiet truth. Abundance, purpose, and peace are inseparable. The body, mind, and spirit move in harmony. Every ache healed, every pain transformed, every temptation overcome, has forged the vessel through which life flows unimpeded. You are awake. You are aligned. You are luminous.